The day my wife told me she was in charge now, I didn't even argue. I just stood there in the middle of our living room, staring at the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. She said it like a declaration of war, calm, confident, and final. From now on, she said, I make the decisions. About the house, the money, everything. Her tone wasn't angry. That was what made it worse. It was the kind of quiet authority you only use when you already know you've won. I laughed a little, thinking she was joking. But then she crossed her arms and said, I'm serious, Nathan. You've had your turn. You've run things long enough. It's my time now. My time? I wanted to ask what that even meant. But I could feel something underneath her words, a kind of practiced confidence, like this speech had been rehearsed. For the past few months, Marissa had changed. She started dressing sharper, acting bolder, talking to me like I was an employee instead of her husband. She'd taken over our finances just to get them organized, but suddenly I couldn't log into our joint account anymore. When I brought it up, she said, I'm just better with numbers. You should focus on work. I wanted to believe she was just finding herself again. She'd always said she gave up her independence when we got married. Maybe this was her taking it back. But the way she looked at me, like she pitied me, told me something else was going on. That night, over dinner, she dropped another bomb. My dad agrees with me, she said casually, cutting into her salmon. He says it's time I take control of my life. That means everything connected to it, including you. Her father, Richard Carver, a man who never liked me from day one. He was the kind of old-money patriarch who believed everyone had a place, and mine was apparently somewhere below his daughter's shoes. Still, I respected the man. He was powerful, intimidating, but always composed. The idea that he was backing her new attitude made my stomach twist. Richard said that. I asked carefully. She nodded. He thinks I've been too dependent on you. He said a woman should know where the money goes and who really runs the household. That didn't sound like Richard. For all his arrogance, he wasn't a man who meddled in marriages. And I remembered something else. Last month, he'd called me from the hospital after his heart procedure. We talked for nearly an hour. He thanked me for taking care of Marissa, said I was the son he never had. So when she mentioned his approval, something didn't sit right. I didn't argue that night. I went to bed pretending to be calm while my brain screamed. She'd lied before, little things, harmless ones. But this was different. This was rewriting the rules of our marriage. I decided I'd pay Richard a visit the next day. If he really told her to take charge, I wanted to hear it from his own mouth. What I didn't expect was his reaction, one that shattered every illusion I had about my wife and exposed a lie that had been years in the making. The next morning, I drove to Richard Carver's estate. All stone walls and iron gates, the kind of place that made you feel small just pulling into the driveway. I'd been there plenty of times, but today felt different. I wasn't visiting as a son-in-law. I was visiting as the man his daughter had just declared she ruled over. Martha, his housekeeper, opened the door before I even knocked. He's been expecting you, Mr. Hale, she said. That caught me off guard, expecting me? Richard was in his leather armchair by the fireplace, coffee in hand, robe tied loose at the waist. He looked older, but his eyes still had that quiet steel. Nathan, he said, I figured you'd come. I sat across from him. Marissa said you told her to take charge, that you wanted her running things, including me. Richard frowned, then laughed, not kindly, but like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. She told you that? Yeah. She said you encouraged it. He set his mug down. Son, I haven't spoken to Marissa in 2 months. Not since she took 40 grand from my personal account. What? I said, the word catching in my throat. She called it a loan for a business venture. I told her to return it or explain what it was for. Instead, she sent a message saying she didn't need my approval anymore. That she was, quote, in charge of her own future. My stomach dropped. A business venture? Richard nodded grimly. I checked. That money went into a shell company under her name. Carver Consulting, registered to an office that doesn't exist. After that, the trail disappears. I stared at the fire, realizing how little I actually knew about what she'd been doing with our accounts. She told me she was managing investments. I muttered. She's managing something, he said, but not investments. He studied me for a moment, then added quietly, this isn't the first time she's done something like this. Back in college, she got mixed up with a man named Daniel Cross. Promised her fast money. Used her name for fake accounts. She nearly got indicted. I paid to make it vanish. He looked ashamed. I thought she'd changed. But if she's saying she's in charge again, Nathan, she's not talking about empowerment. She's talking about control. Someone's filling her head. Maybe that man again. I stood there, trying to breathe through the weight in my chest. You think she's stealing from me? I think, Richard said quietly, that she's building something, and she doesn't want you seeing it until it's too late. That's when I knew this wasn't just a marriage problem. It was a setup, one she'd been perfecting for months. I drove home in silence, Richard's words echoing in my head. Every mile closer to the house, the air inside my truck felt heavier, tighter, like the truth was sitting beside me, breathing down my neck. Marissa had been lying, not just to me, but to her own father. $40,000 missing. A fake business. And the same woman who used to panic over a $200 overdraft was now running some phantom company? When I walked in, she was at the kitchen counter, typing on her laptop. She didn't even look up. "You're home early," she said. "Yeah," I replied, watching her fingers freeze for just a second before she kept typing. "Stop by your dad's place." That got her attention. Slowly, she turned. "You what?" I wanted to hear from him directly. About this whole "I'm in charge now" thing. Her jaw tightened. "And what did he say?" "He said he hasn't talked to you in months," I said evenly. "Not since you took 40 grand out of his account." For a moment, her mask cracked. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but it vanished just as fast. "That's none of your business," she snapped. "The hell it isn't. You've been hiding money, Marissa, and lying. To both of us." She slammed her laptop shut. "Don't talk to me like I'm one of your employees. You have no idea what's going on." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me what's really happening." Her lips trembled for half a second, then curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You wouldn't understand. You never do." That line hit me harder than I expected. I'd heard it before, years ago, back when she was still working for that investment firm. The same tone, the same wall she'd put up before she quit suddenly and told me not to ask why. When she stormed out of the kitchen, I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs, then grabbed her laptop. Password protected, of course, but she'd never changed her phone passcode, and the phone was sitting right there, charging. I used it to access her cloud account, and within seconds, I was staring at folder after folder labeled with random letters and numbers. Inside were screenshots of bank transfers, scanned documents, and spreadsheets. Most were titled Carver Consulting. But what stopped my breath were the transactions. Over $120,000 moved between our joint savings and several accounts I'd never seen before, all under variations of her maiden name. Some transfers had notes like project deposit or client reimbursement. Others just said D.C. fund. I didn't know what any of it meant, but I knew one thing. It wasn't legitimate. I printed everything I could before I heard the shower stop upstairs. Then I put her phone back, closed the laptop, and sat on the couch pretending to scroll through mine. She came down wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. "You look tense," she said softly, walking past me. "Maybe you should trust me a little more. Things are about to change for us." Her words sent a chill through me, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Calm, certain, like she already knew the ending to a story I hadn't even started reading. That's when I realized she wasn't just hiding something. She was preparing for something, and whatever it was, it involved me losing everything. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bank statements. The names, the numbers, the quiet precision of it all. Marissa hadn't just been lying, she'd been planning. And from the size of those transfers, it wasn't small-time manipulation. It was a full operation. By morning, I had a plan of my own. I called my friend Ben, who worked in IT security. He owed me a favor from a few years back when I helped him land a construction contract. "Ben," I said, "I need you to dig into some financial activity, discreetly." He hesitated. "You're talking about your wife?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "And if I'm wrong, I'll owe you dinner for a year. But if I'm right..." I didn't even finish the sentence. He came by that afternoon while Marissa was out meeting a client. I showed him the printouts and explained everything. He scanned them with a frown, his eyes darting line to line. "These aren't fake," he said. "These look like transfers between shadow accounts, the kind used to wash money before moving it offshore." "Money laundering?" I asked. He shrugged. "Could be. Or tax evasion. But here's the kicker. Look at this routing number. It's tied to a brokerage in D.C. That's not something a regular person just stumbles into. Someone with connections helped her set this up. Daniel Cross. The name Richard had mentioned came back like a curse. I'd never met the guy, but I'd heard enough to know he was bad news. A smooth talker who used people until they broke. Ben whistled low. You said she called the company Carver Consulting? That name's showing up in a few state filings. Looks like she incorporated under her maiden name about 8 months ago. Her business address? A law office downtown. Belongs to a guy named Cross, Daniel. My stomach turned cold. Ben looked at me. You want me to keep digging? Yeah, but do it quietly, I said. If she finds out. She won't, he replied. I'll text you when I find something. After he left, I sat in the living room staring at her wedding photo on the mantel. The woman in that picture, smiling, eyes full of light, didn't exist anymore. Somewhere along the way, she'd been replaced by someone calculating, distant, dangerous. When Marissa came home that evening, she was glowing. I had a great meeting, she said, dropping her purse on the counter. We might finally be moving up in the world. I forced a smile. That right? Yeah, she said, pulling a bottle of wine from the cabinet. You'll see soon. Things are changing. For both of us. I wanted to tell her I knew. That I'd seen the accounts, the transfers, the lies. But I didn't. Not yet. Because something told me that whatever she was planning, it hadn't reached its peak. And if I confronted her too early, I might never find out just how deep it went. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from Ben. Found something. Cross and Marissa co-signed a safety deposit box at Fairview Bank. Last activity, 2 days ago. I stared at the text until my vision blurred. 2 days ago, while I was at work, she'd been at a bank with the man who'd almost ruined her once before. Whatever was in that box, it wasn't just money. It was the truth. And I knew I had to see it. Even if it meant tearing my whole marriage apart. The next morning, I parked across from Fairview Bank and waited. It was just after 9 a.m., and the city was waking up. Traffic, horns, the hum of people who still believed the world made sense. I sat there, sipping cold coffee, wondering when mine had stopped making sense altogether. Marissa had left early, saying she was meeting a supplier. I didn't even ask where. I already knew. If Ben's intel was right, she'd been here just 2 days earlier with Daniel Cross. At 9:45, she appeared. Same cream-colored blazer, sunglasses, phone pressed to her ear. Confident. Untouchable. She walked straight into the bank, heels clicking like a countdown. I gave her a few minutes, then followed. Inside, the marble floors gleamed. The clerk smiled. Good morning, sir. How can I help you today? I lowered my voice. I'm here to access my safe deposit box. My wife, Marissa Hale, usually handles it, but she asked me to retrieve some documents. I expected pushback, maybe a demand for identification, but when I showed my driver's license, the woman hesitated only a moment. 1 moment, please. She typed something, then nodded. You're listed as secondary access. Right this way. My heart hammered as she led me through a narrow hallway lined with brass doors. The smell of metal and paper filled the air. She unlocked the small vault door, slid the box out, and placed it on the counter. Take your time. The moment she left, I lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of documents. Incorporation papers for Carver Consulting, wire receipts, and contracts bearing Daniel Cross's signature. But underneath all that, buried beneath a pile of glossy envelopes, was something worse, a power of attorney form. Signed by me. My signature, perfectly forged. It authorized Marissa to transfer, sell, or liquidate any jointly owned assets in the event of Nathan Hale's incapacitation or absence. The date? 3 weeks ago. I felt sick. She wasn't just hiding money. She was setting me up. I flipped through more papers, property deeds, account authorizations, a notarized statement claiming I'd agreed to delegate financial control to my wife. Every document pointed to one outcome. She was preparing to legally erase me from my own life. I snapped photos of everything, shoved the papers back, and slid the box into place. My hands were shaking when I stepped into the main lobby again. As I turned toward the exit, I saw her, Marissa, standing by the teller line, phone in hand, staring right at me. For a split second, our eyes met. Hers went cold. She hung up, smirked, and walked straight toward me. Nathan, she said smoothly, what are you doing here? Could ask you the same thing, I said. She leaned in close enough for her perfume to sting my throat. You shouldn't snoop, sweetheart. You might find things you don't want to know. Then she smiled, calm, deliberate, and walked out the door, leaving me frozen in the middle of the lobby, clutching a truth that could destroy us both. That night, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly until the streetlights blurred. Because now I knew, she wasn't planning to leave me. She was planning to replace me. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Every time I replayed that smirk she gave me in the bank lobby, my stomach twisted tighter. That wasn't a look of surprise or guilt. It was triumph. Like she'd already accounted for me discovering the box. Like this was part of her plan. I parked near the pier and watched the black water shift under the lights. My mind ran through every lie, every meeting, every excuse she'd given me over the last year. None of it was random. She'd been maneuvering. Slowly. Carefully. At 2 a.m., I called Ben. I found the deposit box, I said quietly. She's been forging documents. Power of attorney, property titles, everything. My signature's on half of them. Jesus, he whispered. You need to lawyer up, Nate. She's not just lying to you. She's building a case. She's setting you up for something big. I thought about Richard's words. She's about to take something big, and she wants you too distracted to stop her. Distracted? Yeah. Well, she'd almost pulled it off. By sunrise, I was sitting in the office of my old friend and attorney, Mike Donnelly. When I spread the photos across his desk, he went pale. This isn't amateur work, he said. She's got someone advising her. And not just cross, someone legal. She's forging my signature, I said. Can we prove that? Oh, we will, Mike said. But Nate, you need to be careful. If she's gone this far, she might already have filed something. Divorce, or worse, a fraud claim against you. That thought hit harder than I expected. She wasn't just taking control, she was rewriting the narrative, making me the villain. I went home that afternoon, prepared for a confrontation, but the house was spotless, eerily so. On the kitchen island sat a single envelope with my name written in her perfect cursive. Inside, a printed email draft addressed to her lawyer, Daniel Cross CC'd. I've documented Nathan's erratic behavior and financial mismanagement as discussed. If he tries to access any accounts or assets, proceed with the transfer authorization immediately. Marissa. There was no date, just her name, almost like she wanted me to find it. I stood there gripping the page, my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just deception, this was bait. She was drawing me out, forcing my hand. That night she came home late, humming, setting her purse down like nothing had happened. Rough day? She asked sweetly. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. The woman who used to reach for my hand at night now felt like a stranger wearing her face. Finally, I said, you don't have to fake it anymore. I know about the accounts, the fake business, Cross, all of it. Her smile didn't falter. She just tilted her head slightly, like she was examining a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Good, she said quietly. Then this will be easier. She walked upstairs without another word. And that's when I realized something chilling. I hadn't sprung her trap. I just stepped right into it. I barely slept that night. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing beside me like nothing had happened. It was the calm before a storm she'd already engineered. Every minute that passed, I could feel her tightening the noose, legally, emotionally, financially. By morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. First, an email from my bank saying our joint accounts had been flagged for irregular activity. Then one from my employer's accounting department. Urgent, payroll hold pending verification. She hadn't wasted time. I got up quietly, dressed, and checked my office computer in the den. My work emails were locked. My credentials disabled. She'd contacted my company. My access gone. When I turned, she was standing in the doorway wearing that same calm, polished expression she always used when she knew she'd won. You shouldn't have gone to the bank, Nathan, she said softly. That was a mistake. I clenched my jaw. You forged my signature, Marissa. You stole from your father. You're laundering money with a guy who nearly ruined your life. And I'm the one making mistakes? She sighed like I was being dramatic. You never understood the bigger picture. I told you things were changing. You could have been part of it, but you made yourself the enemy. The enemy? I said. I was your husband. Her eyes hardened. You were a safety net. One I don't need anymore. I took a step toward her. What is this about, really? Money? Power? Cross? She smiled, that same small, terrifying smile. It's about freedom. About not living under someone else's name anymore. You'll understand soon." Before I could say another word, she dropped a folded letter onto the counter and walked out the front door. The sound of her heels echoed down the walkway until I couldn't hear her anymore. The letter was from her attorney. It was official, a motion for separation and financial control transfer. Attached was a temporary restraining order. Filed that morning. It claimed I'd been emotionally volatile and financially reckless, and that I'd attempted unauthorized access to marital assets. In other words, she was accusing me of doing exactly what she had done. My phone buzzed again, a text from Ben. Cross's name popped up in a federal database. Fraud investigation. Major money laundering ring. Marissa's company is listed as an affiliate. The room spun. She wasn't just after me. She was in over her head with criminals, and she was dragging me down with her. I called Ben back, voice shaking. If she's involved in that, they're going to come after both of us. I'm her husband. My name's on everything. Then you need to get ahead of it, he said, before the feds think you're her partner. I looked down at the letter on the counter, her elegant signature printed at the bottom, sharp and deliberate. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd written me out of my own life, piece by piece, until I was nothing more than a name she could erase. But she'd made one mistake. She underestimated how far I'd go to expose the truth. The next 72 hours were a blur of panic, strategy, and caffeine. Mike, my lawyer, moved fast. He filed an emergency injunction to freeze every account tied to Marissa's name, including Carver Consulting. At the same time, Ben handed over every traceable lead he'd found connecting her and Daniel Cross to the federal fraud investigation. We weren't just trying to clear my name anymore. We were trying to stop her before she disappeared with everything. By the third morning, the silence broke. 2 black SUVs pulled up outside our house. For one gut-dropping moment, I thought they were there for me. But when I opened the door, the agent flashed his badge. FBI, we have a warrant for Marissa Hale. They swept through the house in minutes, opening drawers, seizing laptops, collecting files I didn't even know existed. I just stood there, numb, as they carried out boxes of evidence. One of the agents handed me a folded paper. Your cooperation helped move this faster, he said. You might want to thank your father-in-law. Richard. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him again in his study, the same fire crackling, the same calm in his eyes. But this time, he looked tired in a different way, like a man watching a storm he'd seen coming a long time ago. They picked her up downtown, he said quietly. She was at Cross's office. He tried to run. Didn't get far. I just nodded, not sure what to feel. Relief, maybe. Grief, definitely. So it's over? For you, he said. For her, not yet. He slid a small folder across the desk. Inside were copies of her statements, the ones I'd photographed from the safety deposit box. You did the right thing, Nathan. I didn't protect her when she was younger. Maybe now she'll finally have to face what she's become. I stared at the folder. She said she wanted freedom. Richard sighed. Freedom doesn't mean destroying everyone who loves you to get it. When I got home that night, the house felt different. Empty, but peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. I poured myself a drink and sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where she'd once told me she was in charge now. The irony burned. She'd wanted power so badly she'd tried to steal it, forge it, fake it, and in the end, it had destroyed her. A few days later, I got a call from her attorney. She wants to talk, he said. One phone call. You don't have to take it. I hesitated, then said yes. When her voice came through the line, it was faint, brittle. Nathan, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Yes, you did, I said softly. You planned every step. A long pause. Then she whispered, tell my dad I'm sorry. The line went dead. That was the last time I ever heard her voice. Weeks later, the charges against me were formally dropped. My accounts were reinstated. But the trust? The part of me that believed in love built on honesty? That stayed broken. Now, sometimes I drive past Fairview Bank and look at those marble steps where I saw the truth for the first time. Where my marriage ended and my sanity began. She'd said she was in charge now. Turns out, she was, just long enough to lose everything she ever wanted.